What's up, gang? Over the last few days, I've been playing Biomutant, the debut game from Experiment 101, and published by THQ Nordic. Initially, I wanted to put this review out within a day or two, because typically if a game hasn't caught my interest within 3 hours, I usually don't finish it. It's sorta like the 3 episode rule for anime. But after my initial 3 hour window, something really made me feel like I should give the game more time. And here we are, 10 hours later. And you know how they always tell you to follow your own advice? Yeah, let's just get on with the review. Biomutant is an adorable looking action RPG where you get to create and play as Sly Cooper's mutant cousin. Set in a post-apocalyptic landscape after the environment has been destroyed by an evil megacorporation and humanity has fallen. In its place, anthropomorphic mutants must try to make do amongst the ruins of our civilization. While this all sounds bleak and dark, as you can see in the background gameplay, the world is actually quite colorful and offers a pretty whimsical, almost cartoonish look at the apocalypse. I think this is really what initially piqued my interest, as I'm a sucker for cute animals and vivid color palettes. The game's open world environments really embrace this identity, and it's easily one of the strongest selling points of the game. I really enjoyed taking in the world and seeing new areas. However, you're occasionally sent underground, and I found myself just waiting for the segment to end anytime I was removed from the colorful overworld. Bright colors aside, you probably want to know if the story is any good. Well, that depends. Do you like your stories delivered to you through literal hours of expository narration? No? Neither did I. I am not against bare-bones stories that only exist as an excuse for the action, but I really could not get over the amount of exposition that's dumped on you in the first 2 hours just to set up the plot. It isn't even like the narrator has an annoying voice, but when you hear him talk for almost 2 hours straight at the start of the game, in an effort to explain things that they can show you through environmental design, it really seems like overkill. I'm not sure why they decided to go this route, but if they had spread out the exposition a bit more evenly throughout the story, while allowing us to discover some elements for ourselves organically, it would have felt a lot more enjoyable. Honestly, I feel like I'm nitpicking at this point, but I really don't understand why they felt the need to have some of the simplest parts of the story narrated to us. It's like the devs wanted the game to be for children, but also wanted the story to have some real depth, and failed to do a great job at either. I really feel like this game doesn't know who it's for, and this is a recurring issue that also affects the tone, pacing, and combat in the game. One thing that really makes the narrator being so chatty even worse, and I think would be relatively easy to fix, is the fact that the narrator also translates for every character in the game. The NPCs all speak in a gibberish language, which is kinda cute, but you then have to wait for the narrator to translate what the character said, and the translated subtitles don't appear until after the narrator speaks. This whole process adds a major time delay anytime you have to speak to anyone in the game, which really makes me not want to bother with the game's NPCs. This really makes the opening of the game feel like it drags on so much longer than it really should. Realistically though, that ship has already sailed since the game's already out, and it would be impractical, if not impossible, to change it. However, I do think removing the narrator's translations of NPC dialogue and just leaving the text in gibberish language would go a long way to help with the over-narration in the game. Combat feels like an interesting mix of DMC and the Batman Arkham series, and while these are great games to emulate, it really falls quite a bit short of the polish of either game. To be frank, combat is either frustrating or boring to me depending on the number and type of enemies you're fighting. In larger fights, there were many times where I felt like my character was stuck in animations doing special moves when I wanted to parry or dodge an incoming attack, causing me to take damage which ends the combo, which in turn makes me feel like the optimal playstyle against large groups is getting in single hits, then running away till I defeated the single target or had isolated a smaller group of enemies to fight away from the rest of the mob. Maybe more pronounced enemy attacks with a clearer audio cue and a slightly longer startup animation on enemy attacks would help a lot. Or even the ability to cancel special moves with a dodge or parry would help. Meanwhile, smaller groups of enemies are so non-threatening that I really don't feel like it matters what I do when fighting them, especially considering that you heal rapidly out of combat, so damage you take in little skirmishes is of no consequence as long as you don't die. While this could be a conscious design choice to keep the open world exploration feeling fun and non-threatening, it really takes the edge off of combat, especially considering a lot of the time the small groups include one large enemy that generally drops a healing item. So, short of the rare instance of being mobbed by a large group of enemies or a particularly frustrating random mini boss fight, it's kind of hard to die once you know how combat works, even if it does feel a tad bit clunky and really unrewarding. Also, while the game allows you to swap weapons mid-combo, the way it's executed didn't feel intuitive to me, so I didn't really swap very often, and there was no in-game reward for using multiple weapons mid-combo that would make me want to use the clunky feeling system. Speaking of the multiple weapon types in the game, there are also multiple classes you can play as, and I did try 3 of them. But after a bit of time with them, I realized it actually doesn't matter which class you pick, since the most efficient way to deal with enemies usually involves meleeing them. So even though I was really excited to play as a Biomutant, the class system doesn't really encourage that. And I ended up playing the Saboteur just for the purpose of getting the review done. Honestly, this kind of sums up my overall feelings about the game. A giant meh. Outside of my personal vendetta against the narrator, I don't think anything is especially awful, but on the flip side, nothing is particularly amazing either. Sure, I could talk about the game's crafting, but it just kind of exists as a bullet point of features, and in my opinion, doesn't really add much to the experience. The music in the game also just kind of exists and is easy to forget about. The game really seems to suffer from that issue I mentioned earlier, where it doesn't really know what the target audience is, and because of that, it seems to lack direction. It really doesn't matter if they give me 2 choices or 100, if none of my choices matter. Experiment 101 set out to make a vast open world RPG with a unique design. And honestly, for such a small studio, they should be proud that their game isn't a flaming dumpster fire like Cyberpunk turned out to be. And I hope they take this experience and grow from it because they clearly had great ideas. They just needed some work on the execution. Unfortunately, I can't really recommend this game right now. But as I was revising the script for this video, I saw that the studio has heard community feedback and will be looking to address some key things, like the narrator, in an upcoming update. So maybe in the future, I will change my mind on that. If you like the video and want to see if I do change my mind, don't forget to like and subscribe. This has been Kagemyth. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.